Hello and welcome to this demo on how to extend Survey123 with JavaScript and Webpack. The purpose of this demo will be to highlight how we can utilize JavaScript functions available in Survey123 and take them even further by leveraging Webpack to package, manage the code, and bring in additional third-party libraries. So what are JavaScript functions? JavaScript functions in Survey123 allow us to pull in additional tools for more advanced calculations, logic validation, and much more than would be typically available in out-of-the-box utilizing calculations or other methods within Survey123. So there are times when a calculation or logic are just not enough out-of-the-box tools and we need something more complex to solve these. With the standard JavaScript supported within Survey123, there are many tools available, but sometimes you need to go past those expressions, which is where Webpack and JavaScript can come in. Webpack will allow us to bring in additional libraries that are not available within the JavaScript engine for Survey123. These additional libraries can further complement JavaScript in use. We can bring in these additional libraries to do many things like reproject data, find centroids of polygons, query information from feature services, or just leverage them in multiple applications by reusing the code. As part of this demonstration, I'll be highlighting how these JavaScript functions can work within Survey123, how we set up our build environment, and where to store the files for creating our builds from the Webpack and the code base, and utilize those within Survey123. And then for configuring our development environment, we'll be using Visual Studio Code, though any IDE will be just the same. And then we'll really highlight how to bring in additional third-party libraries and package that code for use. As part of the demonstration, I'll be highlighting a series of functions on how to be able to use these. So what do we do when those standard questions just won't do? This is simply just leveraging the XLS form expression syntax. So we use our pull data to be able to call our JavaScript function and call it via our file and JS names, and we'll show how to do that during the demonstration. What functions, but more importantly, we can also pass in parameters or questions that have already been asked as part of the survey to be able to leverage and utilize that data in our JavaScript functions as well. One of the largest advantages of using Webpack is to be able to bring in additional libraries. Utilizing the standard JavaScript engine contained within Survey123, not all libraries are available to you. And so by being able to use Webpack, we can bring in those additional libraries, package up that code into a singular file that can be used in Survey123 across many different projects. So that allows us to get even more additional logic beyond just simple data validation and other things that we can do out of the box. So let's go ahead and dive in to how we're going to set up Webpack and Survey123 and highlight the different ways we can begin to bring in and work with this data. For the first part of this demo, we're going to discuss how to configure the Survey123 and the Webpack to work together using Visual Studio Code. To start with, we're going to go ahead and clone a repository to a location to work with. So I'm going to clone a repository that we have available for handling this Webpack. So I'm just going to paste in the URL up here and download this repository to a drive on my machine. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder for this. And select this as my repository location. This will now download this, and now it's going to open up this repository for me at this location. So when this repository opens up, we can take a look and see a few of the things that we've provided as part of this repository to get you started on this. So the initial one is the JS for Survey123 folder. This will contain all of our source folders, our content, and also our current package JSONs that we have available to us, and also our Webpack config file. So this will be the definition of where we push the data out to, and we'll get into that a little bit more in just a second. In addition, we have a series of polyfills. As Survey123 does not implement the full JavaScript engine and does not have everything available, there are certain spots where we have to add those to do some of the functions we want to be able to do inside of the JavaScript environment. So we provide you with a console, some development environments, some convenience methods for doing fetches, promises, and also some terminal outputs. And we'll dive into those a little bit more as we start building out our forms and show how those different components get utilized. The index.js file will provide us with where we put our functions. We can place them in other spots, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll go ahead and just start putting these in this location and build it out from there. So the first step we need to do now is to be able to install all of the additional node libraries that are available to this. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up a terminal window, and I'm going to go into the JS folder itself. And just take a look at the output there, and you can see our JSON packages and Webpack configs that we'll be providing. So I'm just going to go ahead and run the npm install to be able to bring in all of those additional libraries that we have in our package. It's installed those now, so we should be able to come in here and we have our node libraries available to us. So we have our node modules that have now been imported into this project. So once we've installed that, we can begin to build out and construct our functions for how to set this up with Survey123. Now that we've installed the npm libraries on our location, what we need to be able to do now is build and output our code to where we can grab it in Survey123. So if I simply come down to my terminal window here and run the build script, so if I run npm run -script build, it will simply go through and build our file based on our web config that we set up earlier. So it's basically going to build it out in a folder called Webpack.js scripts. Now what we need to be able to do is get that scripts folder to where our Survey123 folder can see it. So if I come up here to my desktop and open Survey123, I can simply open the files location here, and you'll notice that I have a directory with my Survey123 content, but I currently don't have a scripts folder in here. So what I want to be able to do is open a terminal tab at this folder, and now you can see I'm within this folder, and so I'm going to create a symbolic link back to my file location where I have that folder available to me. And so I've actually created another terminal window here with that command in it that will link to my Survey123 directory to the scripts folder that I've built out in for Webpack. So if I go ahead and create that link is now created, and I have a scripts directory here that I can go into. So now if I come into scripts, I should see my mylibrary.js file that I'm utilizing over in my build folder on the other side. So now if I come back to Survey123, I'm going to build out a form. So in this case, I have a form already built that has a call to my hello world, and I'm going to make a quick update to that to call into my thing. So here, I've built out a note file with a label that's simply going to do a pull data from a JavaScript function into the hello world call that I have that I'm going to build over in my JavaScript file. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And when I come to Survey123, it still should show an error because I don't have a file there. This is just to show you how quickly we can update this content. So if I come back in here to my Survey123 Webpack form and come into my index.js file, I'm actually going to now build a quick export function called hello world. Not passing any parameters at this point. And all I'm simply going to do is return a JSON string. And I'm going to JSON stringify a string called hello world. And I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to build this file again. So I'm going to run the build script. Once that's done building, I'm going to go back to my Survey123, and now you'll notice that that form has already updated because I've utilized that link to be able to go from my Survey123 form into this content and show that hello world. So that's a simple function of just being able to call into my function, utilizing that pull data script that we have available to be able to go in, grab that content, and pull it out, as simple as that. So now I want to start building out a few more advanced functions for how we're going to do a couple of things. So now that we've built the simple hello world sample, what I want to be able to do now is actually probably be able to interact with my form itself. So I'm going to go to my Visual Studio Code, switch over to that, and I'm going to extend out this function just a little bit more by allowing me to pass in a parameter to it. So let's say I want to say what language I want the hello world to come in. And let's just do a pretty simple function here. So if language equals en, return hello world, else if language equals es for Spanish, we're going to return JSON.stringify of, in this case, and then if no language was selected, let's go ahead and just return a little error. No language was selected from the form. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's go ahead and build that function out. So now once we come back to Survey123 Connect over here, we should see an error that states that no language was selected because we haven't passed one through at this point. So let's go ahead and switch over to our XLS form for this, and let's bring our note question down, and let's create a little choice list here. So let's come in here and create a choice list for language. We'll just do the two choices we built into the filter, and Spanish, and we will come back over here and create a select one of language. And then we're just simply going to create that as a select one. So now over here in our pull data calculation, we're simply going to now, rather than just pass the function, we're actually going to go ahead and pass a parameter over to it. So at the end here, to pass a parameter, all I need to do is make a callback in my Survey123 form to select underscore lang, and that will pass that language that we selected in that first one back. So let's go ahead and update our form. So let's come back here to Survey123 Connect, and you'll notice now we have a language on there, but we didn't quite get our form correct. So let's go back and check something. Fix our form a little there. And then come back into Survey123 Connect to see now that we have our two languages selected, EN and ES. So if we select each one, as we drive through it, it will call back to that JavaScript function to pull back and be able to get those additional hello worlds that we placed into it. Now that we've added the hello world sample, I want to be able to extend this out a lot further. One of the things that we provide within the Webpack is the ability to get some console terminal output and some of the other functionality that we have available. So I'm actually going to go ahead and paste in some code that I have from another library, and we'll walk through what it is in just a second. And I'm going to go ahead and delete the original one I just did there. But now I have a slightly different form here with my hello world section and a couple of other things, but I'm still utilizing the same forms here. But now I've added this debugging section that allows me to come into the JavaScript and actually get some of the output. So if I look here in my form, I have a code helper section that's pretty much going to provide a JS terminal, some output, and some JavaScript console. I'm going to actually build that, but first we're going to go back and look at what that looks like in Visual Studio Code. So if I come back into Visual Studio Code, you'll notice that we have some helper methods around the Get console, the debug terminals, and some other environments that we have available to be able to leverage. So the first thing I'm going to do, so once I've added these in, I can now actually produce some console outputs. So you'll notice I have a couple here that are already undefined and ready to go, but what I want to do is actually be able to add some console logging up to my hello world statement. So if I come in to my JavaScript function here and simply say add a console statement, so I can add a console.log statement here that says something like reached hello world. Save that file, go ahead and build that out. Now come back to my Survey123 form, and right now I have my get console pointing at code, but I want to go ahead and just point it at my hello world form or my hello world note. So whenever that changes, I should get a console log here that states that. I'm going to go ahead and save that form, go back and look at it in Survey123. And so you can see it's reached hello world. So as I change the language each time, it's going to keep outputting a console statement. That allows me to debug my code without having to output a lot of JSON and other things. So I can utilize those console functions to be able to grab some code and information as I'm working with it and be able to bring that data out to the user in the front end. Now what I want to do is highlight one of the real powers of where Webpack comes in to the JavaScript environment that we're building here. It's actually the ability for us to be able to bring in third-party libraries or libraries from other locations. So in the case of what I want to be able to show here, I actually want to bring in a third-party library that allows me to project my data on the fly. So I'm going to open up this library called Proj4GIS. So this allows me to transform coordinates from one system to another and be able to allow me to leverage that. But it's third party to ArcGIS Online. So I want to be able to bring it into my project and leverage it as part of my application. So what I'm going to do is come down here into Visual Studio Code again, and now I just need to install that particular library from npm. So if I come in and just install this library, I'm just going to install proj for GIS. So I'm going to go ahead and install proj4. Now that's installed, so I can simply come up here and add an import statement to import proj for GIS into my project. That will allow me to leverage that project and be able to bring it in. So I have a function that I've already built to do some of this, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this in. So I'm going to paste this into my project here. So this function will allow me to basically pass in a location from a map and be able to check it to see that I passed in a location, otherwise pass in an error. And in this case, I'm going to project it to a different coordinate system so I can store those coordinate systems along with my survey. But just doing this using the proj4 and then projection, and it assumes that the data is in latitude and longitude, which it will come in as. So here I can go ahead and save this file, and let me go ahead and rebuild this particular project. So now I'm going to rebuild this, and that'll rebuild it into my folders. And so in this case, I'm going to come back to my demo form, and I've actually already added a few forms in here to be able to process some of this. So I've added a new geopoint that's going to allow me to capture the location where the user clicks on a map. I've added a text field that's going to just show me the location output from my call to reproject with my location. But then I want to be able to store my X and Y separately. So since I know I passed this back as JSON, I'm simply going to pull out the decimal and grab the X and the Y from it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and come back to Survey123 Connect, and so that's going to load this up, and we should see a new section in here with our location. And right now we don't have our data being passed in there, so we're currently getting our error. And so if I go ahead and simply click on the map somewhere, draw on it, you can see now it's reprojected that coordinate to the coordinate system I defined, and I'm able to get the X and the Y of that redefined coordinate system out by simply just making that JavaScript call. For the final part of the demo today, I'm going to be importing the library turf that will allow us to be able to do some advanced geoanalytics on geometry that's coming from our Survey123 forum. So if I look at turf, it simply allows me to be able to bring in a variety of different geoanalytical tools through JavaScript to be able to simply perform simple coordinates or a variety of different measurements on these coordinates. The one we're going to be doing is creating a centroid from a polygon that we create in Survey123. So if I go back over to my Visual Studio Code, I'm simply going to install the turf module using So once that module has been installed, we can go ahead and leverage the turf modules as part of our installation. So I'm going to go ahead and copy some code over from a pre-existing one. First, I'm going to add in some of the helper and simple functions at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and place these in. So I'm going to add in a helper function and the centroid function that we're going to use in our Survey123 form. So I'm going to copy over some code. So I've created some code to convert and work with the geometry from how it comes in Survey123 into what TURF is expecting in a GeoJSON format. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring these over here. I'm going to copy this code out of here and bring it in to my primary index, paste it in here, and so now I have these functions available. The create polygons and the group polygons are helper functions. So in that case, I don't need to export them out to my Survey123 because I don't need to utilize them there. I just use them in here. But I am going to export the function for the get centroid and simply pass in a group of polygons. So you can pass in one or many polygons to be able to create a centroid for a group of polygons. So I'm going to save my file. And then go ahead and build this output. So I'm going to run my npm and build this script. So put that out there in my JavaScript folder and have that available. So now I'm going to come back to my Excel form, and I've added in a section here to work with this geometry coming from the TURF service. So I have simply a group here. I'm going to do a repeat so I can actually add multiple geoshapes or polygons into it. And then to handle some of the ways that passing that back into the JavaScript, I'm actually going to create a note field here so I can simply grab a join of all of those different polygon areas with a delimiter that I can simply parse out in the JavaScript code. And then from that, I'm going to get the centroid back from here, and I'll be able to just show that on the form. And then I'm actually going to use that point that I get back from the centroid to create a new geopoint in the form. So let's go ahead and save that and come back onto our form back here. So it's going ahead and converting that for us. And so now I load it. So now there's no, so if I open my geometry with TURF section here, there's no geometries that have been created, but if I go ahead and sketch a geometry, we'll just sketch it over the Redlands campus here. Select that. Now I output a lot of JSON here just to be able to visualize it, but I can take a look at it. So that's the polygon that got created from Survey123. And then here's the centroid that got created. And as you can see here, the centroid is right over the center of where that polygon would have been created. So now if I come back in, since I've created a repeat for this polygon, I can actually add a second one. And let's place this polygon over the University of Redlands here. Go ahead and save that. So now if you come down, this is the geometry for that polygon. It's a little more complicated. But now if you notice my centroid, it's now averaging between the Redlands campus and the University of Redlands. So it's calculating the bounding box for these two polygons and then generating the centroid based on that. So that's how we are able to bring in an additional third-party library to do some of the more advanced analytics that aren't capable out of the box. So we can use those functions from third-party libraries to do some of those features for us. Thank you for attending this demo on extending Survey123 with Webpack. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and if you could please fill out the survey by following the link directly below this video. Thank you.